first few years were an absolute disaster because I did everything that I advised my clients not to do. I think the majority of those joining me from a corporate environment are on that job to journey path. And I would say that job to journey sort of trigger point for them happens probably at 3 points.
So Roger, welcome. When I was thinking about this podcast, one, you were one of the first people to actually encourage me to do a podcast and tell me to get on with it. But then when I came up with the theme and the title, From Job to Journey, I thought I really want Roger as my first guest because frankly, I can't think of anyone's career who most encapsulates from job to journey. Initially, in the most literal sense, Roger, I recall you telling me many years ago, you literally walked out of your job to start the journey. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, it sounds a little bit dramatic, so just walking out, but in effect, that's what I did. So I got us to a stage in my corporate career, and I was happy in my job. I had a great job. Where I was thinking, what's next? What is this? What I want to do for the rest of my working life? And I'd worked for fast growth firms in the past, and they're quite entrepreneurial. And I'd always had the yearnings to start up my own business. And it's also sort of quite an important time, about a year before my father had passed away. And that sort of got me thinking as well about what's next. And I thought, well, I don't want to be sitting on my rocking chair, age 100, looking back and regretting anything. So almost literally, I handed in my notice and thought, I'm going to start my own business, my own consultancy business, some coaching business. I had no business plan at all.
Really?
And that was reflected in my business. And I'm happy to admit it now because things picked up dramatically after the first few years. First few years were an absolute disaster because I did everything that I advised my clients not to do. I had no plan. I had a sort of a vision. But I didn't really have a clear service offering. I didn't really have clear pricing. I knew vaguely who my ideal clients were, but I had absolutely no idea how to attract them. So I was literally going from feast to famine in the first few years, and it wasn't very comfortable when I was looking at my bank statement.
So
Yes, I did just quit.
Literally, had you scribbled, you'd had the idea, you felt it, you wanted a different path, and you I'm sure, scribbled some notes and had some ideas, but you hadn't literally written a business plan down. You just left without the business plan in place.
Yeah, there was zero business plan. I knew roughly what the focus of the business was going to be because I'd been in sort of a sales, marketing, business development. I loved people. I thought there was a big need to improve, and I'd always operated at senior levels in client companies in sort of, global key account management roles. So I knew I wanted to be positioned there and solve problems that companies have interacting at that level. But I didn't really know how I was going to do it. Kind of cool. No plan.
So you left your job. I know you went to INSEAD at some point. When did you realize that you maybe needed to put some more credentials down and get some more education rather than just dive into the whole consultancy approach, without that background or that footprint?
Well, I'd say it was a few years afterwards, probably almost 9 years afterwards. I went to INSEAD, and I'll come to that in a moment. And I probably look in retrospect, going out almost with no business plan actually did have some benefits because I wasn't really looking at the competition, which I should have. So I was going gung-ho into clients when I eventually did get talking to clients. So I thought I had the expertise for sure, but I was making some mistakes along the way. Expertise is actually totally irrelevant in many ways. It's really focusing on a problem that you could solve for clients. So the actual way I moved out of feast and famine was I thought, well, people are making a success of this consultancy and coaching world. What are they doing different to I'm doing? So I looked at those who are successful and what they did when they first started. And I simply replicated what they were doing and gradually then the business took off. And I wanted to stay at the top of my game or be positioned at the top of my game. And INSEAD offer a master's degree in what was then called Consulting and Coaching for Change, which is clinical organizational psychology. And I realized the issues clients have both individually and in teams isn't the processes within their work. It's all up here. And therefore, that was an extremely valuable addition, not just the knowledge, but also then the INSEAD network was of tremendous benefit to the business. So that's sort of the story of going to INSEAD, as it were.
So maybe flipping back then, Roger, to your point of observing what other people did and how they did it and how they were successful. How did you go about finding those people or observing them and then codifying for your own approach what you felt was the right path? And you obviously found it useful and actually leveraged it.
Yeah, so what I did early on, I fairly soon, more by chance, discovered others who were working in my space or a related space. And I actually organized a lunch for everybody, sort of almost a lunch and share session where we shared the challenges we were having in our business. And we started sort of almost like a mini self-help group from a business perspective. I then also did quite a bit of Googling around to those who have, written books, and many of them on the shelf behind me, to see what they were doing and were doing earlier in their career, because, they were all successful international gurus at that point. And it seemed that one of the common traits of people was actually growing the business initially through partnerships, borrowing other people's trust. And that's how I secured my very first large client, a large US multinational firm, where I managed to sort of break into them simply via an introduction from what I call now, in the process that I use with clients, a power partner. So that's how I sort of examined what was happening, formed what you might call sort of this mini business group, this mini mastermind group of peers, but then doing lots of Googling around at the same time.
No, we'll come on to how you've codified that today a bit later, Roger. But what did you observe at the time? Because, having a job is you work for big companies, you had your business card, you had that name. What did you observe and what do you think were the requisite qualities that you displayed that enable you to go from, please come and buy my product, I'm Roger Jones, but I work for X company, to please buy Roger Jones? What was your observations about what mentality and skill set you had to do to make that transition?
Well, let me first make it clear, when I started out, I did not have the mentality or probably much of the skill set to do it, because I was going from famine to more famine and occasional feasting. However, you've hit on an important point, because to actually be successful, particularly if someone's had the security of a corporate job for many years, and there's that safety net, of income, you also have sort of your identity wrapped up in the corporate world. You have respect wrapped up in your job title. When you jump out, all that goes. And the greatest thing I think someone needs is a mindset shift or pivot to what describe as a more entrepreneurial mindset. And I'd say I didn't make that initially. I didn't really make that link, because I didn't actually think of myself as an entrepreneur initially. It was only when I was working with a client, a one-to-one client, a senior executive in a firm, who one day said to me, Roger, what's it like to be an entrepreneur? And I'd always thought of myself as an expert, a consultant and coach, and not an entrepreneur. And that really made me think, yeah, he's right. I am an entrepreneur. And I started then to think, how do entrepreneurs approach business? How do they think about setbacks and opportunities? And when I started to make that shift to an entrepreneurial mindset, that's when my business really started to grow and be more successful. And I also got a greater sense of inner confidence, because the setbacks every entrepreneur has, regardless of what sector they're in, can really knock you back at times. But you've got to pick yourself up, and you've almost got to see them as opportunities rather than setbacks. So I think that was probably one of the absolute key learnings for me.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, Roger, that at one level you hear about the entrepreneurs of today, the Stephen Bartlett's, or he's actually interviewing someone like Mr. Beast, who was a 12-year-old saying, "I just want to be a YouTuber." And then you go on to musicians who just stayed in their room playing guitar or drums or whatever instrument. I think the difference is, and good on them, but they had nothing to start with, right? You're a 12-year-old, you're a 17-year-old, you've got no money. They're passionate about what they do and they make it and hundreds don't. But I think it's very difficult if you have a job and you were used to a sum of money coming in and you had that infrastructure all about you and you can always phone somebody else to check an idea. The mindset shift of becoming an entrepreneur when you've already had a job is probably almost more difficult, I would imagine.
It is difficult. However, as I advise people today, there's a number of things I think someone needs to do, and some of this is actually before they jump. It's to get prepared for that mindset shift and get prepared to that sort of different outlook you've got to have on business and also on life. It's also to do some real practical things before someone jumps, like have a cushion of money that's going to last you 6 months, a year, so you don't feel desperate in that initial period, because although you're going to hope you're going to secure your first contract within a week, and hopefully that does happen, it could well take longer. So it's put some practical things in place, to think what your expertise is, but then think what problem does that solve for clients. So there's all that preparation initially. And then something that I do daily now, and I recommend clients do, is, well, first of all, be really clear on where you're headed. Have a vision for 5 years' time. What's it going to be like in a typical day in 5 years when you've scaled your business to where you want it to be? And also think, what are some of those milestones in a year and 2 year? And actually, in your mind's eye, actually live that experience of a typical day. And then be very practical and list all the reasons you're going to succeed. And I recommend some practice I have: read it once a day. And every day, write down 3 things you've accomplished that day. In the evening, write that down. And 3 things you plan to accomplish the following day to drive your business forward. Very simple habits. Once you get into them, they help you when there's a setback. And there's always going to be a setback. They keep your mind focused, and it keeps your mind fresh moving forward.
And I think that's really good advice, Roger, because when I speak to other people who have made this leap, I think people are very honest about the fact that, and especially with COVID happening and since then, it's very easy to walk the dog, tidy the house, think of something that could be done, and then wait for that deadline. Hopefully they've got some work or they've got a commission, and then suddenly, like, oops, a week to go, I better start writing it, or I better get into London and meet those people and networking with them. And I think, what you're saying is really good advice for the entrepreneur or the person starting a journey, because you have to have a mindset of, you don't have to sit at a desk, but you have to get to the task every single day. Otherwise, I'm sure it's very easy for time to drift and for things to move away from you very quickly.
Totally. And, for me, what I do is, sure, I've got the 5-year vision, I've got the 2-year vision, and then there's the 1-year goal. I then have, for the first 6 months of the year, I plan it in 6-week cycles. So it's quite detailed for 6 weeks, and then may have to adjust the following 6-week plan. But it's all aimed at hitting that 1-year goal. And that 1-year goal isn't just revenue, though I think revenue is an important goal because it's a calibration of the value you deliver in your business to clients, regardless of what business you're in. Within that 6 weeks, it's things related to filling your pipeline with new prospects, to working with clients and continually upgrading your work, and also learning yourself. I think the most successful entrepreneurs that I work with and have the pleasure of knowing are also life learners. They're reading, they're listening to podcasts, to audiobooks whenever they can, with the aim that if there's one thing I can learn from this, it's been a worthwhile investment. And the other thing I've noticed, and I recommend my clients do, is they actually invest in themselves. I think an error that many corporate execs make when they jump out to do their own thing is they don't want to invest in their own business, but they need to. They need to think of it as a business, separate it from the personal side, treat it as your business. And if it is your business, how much are you prepared to invest? Are you prepared to invest X amount to get a 3 or 4 times return on this money? And that can be in some form of training, some form of marketing, whatever it is. So just a few insights.
So Roger, maybe just stepping back up, because I think what I'd like to move on to is the journey that you've taken in terms of evolving your own product set and the way you've done that. But maybe you just mentioned your C-level customers and you talked about them starting the journey, but maybe let's talk about them when they actually had their day jobs of being a C-level exec, because that was your first focus from a kind of consulting and relationship perspective. What was your observations about those C-suite executives in terms of their doubts and their concerns? Because you were a coach to them for many years. And I'm pretty sure they had insecurities and questions and need for advice. And that's when they had a job. Forget about when they didn't have a job. So what was your observation of those years of coaching and where most C-level executives needed assistance or were looking for assistance?
Excellent question. I think, well, there is so much in what you've just asked, and it is so dependent on the individual and also the company. Now, I can make some real sort of broad brush observations, and it does depend whether the client was the chief executive or they were reporting in to the chief executive. If it was the chief executive, then the old adage, it's lonely at the top, and all the insecurities that come with that, particularly when someone starts a job, like, will I be found out? It's the imposter syndrome. They all come into play there. If it's a C-level exec, particularly in a large company, there's lots of talk around the politics.
Yeah.
And, where do I want to go from here? What's happening there? How should I build a better relationship with that person? They always think about their career, what they want to do, what they want to do next. So I'd say it is so dependent on the individual. And if someone wants to Google my name, Roger E. Jones, Harvard Business Review or INSEAD Knowledge, you'll see some of the articles that I've published in those two journals on this topic. And they cover things from fears of chief execs, why top teams become dysfunctional, from stress to success when you make it to the top, and even to how someone's early family dynamics dictate how they work and how they interact in team environments. Great question, but the answer is really broad and that's dependent on the individual.
And one of the things, and then maybe moving on a little bit, Roger, I've known you, many years. We've worked together in coaching assignments and facilitation work groups. And one thing that I honestly saying this, I admire about you is your ability to be sort of very calm and objective and to some extent almost one step removed from the tensions or the dynamics in the room, which is part of your skill set. And, you come across as a very relaxed guy like you do on this podcast, but behind it is a determination to think forward, evolve, have an entrepreneurial mindset. And I think So let's maybe move a little bit on, because I think from a journey perspective, you did coaching for a number of years, but I'm not quite sure whether it's 5, 6 years ago. Then you really thought about, I want to take a different approach. I'm going to start building a product. I'm going to start using a different type of approach. And that's actually evolved, and we'll come on to where it stands today. But how did you go about thinking, actually, I need to push myself further and differently? I don't just want to coach these C-level guys. I think there's more that I want to offer, or a different path. How did you evolve your own journey?
Well, what was happening, and I go back sort of the timeline, were lots, a small grouping of independent consultants, executive coaches were asking me how I did certain things in my business. Now, my expertise, as it were, was actually getting in to see very senior people within companies, typically chief executives, and there were some very large global firms, and I had a very high success rate of getting in to meet the chief exec, and often those conversations would turn into business, and I was charging, towards the top of my market. So others knew about this. They were saying, Roger, how do you do this? How do you get in to see so-and-so? How should I price this? They were asking for advice, which I was very happy to share. However, in 2019 into, early 2020, I thought, well, I love the work I've been doing. It's, fantastic, all the work that I called it, the CEO advisory work. But I'd love to explore this other opportunity and pivot my business to help solo consultants, solo executive coaches, those starting on their journey, those very experienced who need a refresh, help them in their business. So that's the reason I made the pivot in 2020. I didn't get rid of all my corporate clients immediately. I kept a few. I still have a couple today, and I still work with newly appointed chief executives of corporate companies and medium-sized firms. However, it was that reason of people coming to me that I decided to pivot. I then sat down, systematized a process that someone either who's had their consulting firm for a few years or many years, or someone new into consulting or coaching, or their expertise-based business, if they follow the formula, they're going to get results. I guarantee results if they follow the formula, and it will give them access to their ideal C-level decision makers when they're implementing the process, because there's a certain magic sauce within the process that simply works.
Right. But you've evolved the product itself, and obviously I'm sure you've refined it as you've learned things, of people have come back to you with feedback. But you've also evolved the pricing of it, the modularity of it, the timescales of it. That's just probably the ongoing task, right? Keep evolving, keep growing, keep amending, and making it the best product it can be.
Totally, that's so true. I think after every client, I think, how can I improve this part? How can I make it easier? How can I remove friction from the process to make it easier for them? The other important thing that I probably should have started sooner, and I would actually advise all consultants and coaches to do this, is document what you've done, the processes. And that's so much easier now with AI to actually think of what it was you did to get that transformation with a client, or get them to do something. Because if it applies to that person, it's likely to apply to others. So yes, you're right. And the product and the delivery mechanism has evolved, and it's evolved further for this year as well, with regards to the platform I'm using, how the group coaching's being managed, those who have been through the program, how I support them with an inner circle group after the program if they want to join it. So yes, it's constant evolution. And I don't think that's ever going to change. I think if someone doesn't do that, then it's a bit like the old hackneyed expression about the university lecturer with the dog-eared notebook, just delivering the same old thing. It's going to work for a few months. But in today's environment, You got to keep one step ahead of the market the whole time to be really relevant.
And would you say the majority of your clients are actually on a from job to journey path? Is that one of the most common paths that people are actually taking, or is it just a whole variety of people in a whole variety of different situations?
I think the majority of those joining me from the corporate environment are on that job to journey path. And I would say that job to journey sort of trigger point for them happens probably at 3 points. Some people have been working for 20 years and start to reflect back and think, is this it? Is there something more that I want or can get out of this or get out of this career that I have? So that's one trigger point. Another is they've been released from their firm and they're looking for something new, something challenging to do. Others are at a stage in their career where they're thinking, am I going to make it to this next stage? Am I going to make it to the corner office? And they've come to the decision either they don't want to make it to the corner office or they're not going to make it. How can I still have a really fulfilling career? So yes, a fair chunk of my clients are on the job to journey, as it were.
And I think, I think it took some time to evolve, but the recognized authority is probably the is probably the best way of summarizing in 3 words. The fundamental part of your program really is you have to have an expertise that somebody wants to pay money for. I mean, it sounds very easy to say, but I think, I've been on your journey and I've read many of your materials you've kindly shared, but that to me is the key tenet. You have to have a unique expertise that gets you into those boardrooms or into those meetings that frankly makes people want to part with their money to leverage your experience.
Correct. And I'm going to add 2 more components into it. And think of it as a Venn diagram. There's someone's passion, what they absolutely love doing. There's their professional genius, which is their expertise, another circle. And then there's acute problem that clients have. So where that then could become, everything can overlap into one circle. That's the absolute sweet spot. It's unlikely to happen. So you've got to think of your professional genius, your expertise, your true passion and acute problem the client has. But it's coming to thinking of the acute problem, you also got to think of, is there a burning platform? Is there a willingness to pay? Is it an evergreen problem? Ideally, you want a problem that's going to be a problem this year and in 5 years' time, although you are going to evolve as a professional. So those 3 elements where they overlap, that's the absolute sweet spot.
No, I think that passion element's an interesting point, Roger, because I'm sure we've all done it, in the corporate environment. You ask somebody about their weekend or you ask them about a project and, the language will come out with a relative amount of enthusiasm if they're professional and confidence. But then you say, how did your kid get in on the soccer game on Saturday? And suddenly their eyes light up and the smile beams and they explain how they scored a hat trick, or it could be the school play or something like that. And the body language is just 10 times more passionate, right? And I think one of the things that I think you've always told me to do, and you've done it to yourself, is find something that you're passionate about that you can leverage into this path. And you've always told me, Peter, just get on with that podcast. But I know you took comedy as an example to say, well, if I can stand up in front of people I don't know and somehow not have things thrown at me for 10 minutes, then that's going to stand me in good stead in the passion I exhibit with my customers. And I don't know if you've got any extra observations about cross-pollinating passion, if you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean, and I think that is so relevant. It's relevant if someone's in a corporate environment and they're a salesperson going out to meet clients, or you have your own independent expertise-based business going out to work with clients or stakeholders. At the end of the day, people do buy people.
Yeah.
And if you've got a passion about what you do, you've got a genuine enthusiasm, that will be contagious. And if there's a couple of consultants or coaches to choose between, the one more likely, not necessarily, the more likely to secure the business is going to be the one who has that genuine passion for their work, because it is just so contagious.
So, Roger, maybe as we come towards the end, what are those final recommendations you would give to people who want to go from job to journey? And maybe if they think that what they've heard from you today is relevant, how should they best reach out to you and at least inquire about what paths might be open to them?
What I would recommend they do is, while they're still in the corporate environment, start to think what they truly want in the rest of their career. So they are sitting in, imagine they're sitting in their rocking chair, aged 100, looking back in their career. What do they want to achieve? And if it is a more entrepreneurial expertise business, then start to think, what is your true expertise? What is that acute problem you can potentially solve? Talk to others in the market, some people you trust, use them as a sounding board. While you're still in the corporate environment, if you can, continue to develop your network, just not within your current organization, but within other organizations. So you've got a bit of a network when you jump out. Be prepared for the fact it's not going to be a smooth journey initially. Hopefully it will be, but be prepared for a bit of a choppy sea to start off with. But however, have that vision that you're going to succeed, have the personal beliefs you're going to succeed, write down a list of the reasons why you're going to succeed, and develop the inner confidence. If there are two consultants I come across today, one is a success and another is struggling, and all other factors are the same, the difference between the two is typically mindset. So that's what I would recommend. And if anyone would like to find out more about my business, then you can simply go to Roger E. Jones, that's RogerEJones.com. You come across my website. And if you go to rogerejones.com/Peter Cantor, to the host of this podcast, then you'll be able to download a complimentary copy of my book, which will get you in good stead, which is called The Trusted Pipeline: How You Can Become the Recognized Authority in Your Market Without Selling. And that can act as your guide while you're still in the corporate environment, or even if you've just jumped out, to know the steps you need to take to be successful in your business.
Well, that's very generous, Roger. We'll also put all the details in and links in writing underneath the podcast as well. But thanks very much. I'm sure, look, thanks again for being my first guest. I would love to have you back in the not too distant future, because I think this is a journey and we're all on it. And I'm sure you've got a lot more to offer. And in 6 months or a year's time, your approach will have evolved a little bit more by then as well.
I look forward to being on a future edition, and I wish you every success with Job to Journey, Peter.
Thanks, Roger.